So the reason we're starting with Nuggets Wolves is because that game just finished probably 25 minutes ago, and it was an incredible back and forth battle between Anthony Edwards and Jamal Murray in the second half. I had an absolutely fantastic time watching this game. It was a mess in the first half. It was a mess in the third quarter for the Denver Nuggets, who showcased a lot of the same defensive warts that we saw later in the season in this game, or in the third quarter at least. It was fascinating to watch them kind of revert into those struggles defensively. I think part of it was some adjustments that Chris Finch and the Minnesota staff made. We'll talk about that momentarily. But Anthony Edwards goes for 41 points, 4 assists on 14 for 23 from the field. Jamal Murray goes for 40 points on 13 for 22 from the field. Each went 6 of 10 from 3. It was an incredible game, an incredible back and forth battle that I so thoroughly enjoyed watching. So I just want to shout out those two guys. The shot making display on the stage was incredible. It was also a really interesting battle between Rudy Gobert and Nikola Jokic in this game. And I thought that was probably actually where I want to start the analysis portion of it, because did it feel like to you, like it felt like to me, that Minnesota was able to really be physical with Jokic inside in a way that, they didn't get away with as much in game one. And they also, as this game went on in the fourth quarter, they did not get away with as much physicality against Jokic in the fourth.
Well, yeah, that's what was frustrating is the wrong way to put it. But I just think I'll get it out of the way now because I don't want to do it anymore. But the just consistency in reffing has been really rough across the board in the playoffs. And I think tonight was an encapsulation of that. Exactly like you mentioned, like in the first quarter and a half, I thought both teams were able to play really physically. I thought the Wolves were using that to, even with them being down, I thought that they were doing that with Jokic, exactly like you mentioned. But then the refs started calling the game differently. And then we have like 4 players with 5 fouls on both sides. And you could tell players on both sides were frustrated like that. And understandably, like I would be frustrated too. I thought that, I wasn't there on court, so I can't hear what Rudy said. Even with me, somebody who is, definitely a lot less receptive to some of Rudy's antics. Like I thought it was a pretty weak tech. The one call on Ant where Yoke just falls over was extremely weak. Like we got a lot of those kind of grab ass calls, and that was frustrating to see. But I agree. I think that they did a really good job of just playing him physically. And then Jokic kind of dusted Rudy over the last, quarter and a half. I thought there were some really good possessions from Rudy on him, and I thought he stood him up in the post a few times, but clearly was able to take advantage of him in the fourth. Really just found his footing, finally hit his stride in the game. And once that everything baked in with I thought with what the Jokic AG 2-man game was tonight, opened up a ton. Like if you left any kind of put any kind of help in the lane in case Jokic was spinning into it or had any kind of an angle on Rudy, then AG was cutting baseline, or they'd run a quick snug pick and roll in early offense, and there wasn't really an answer for it. And I thought, that's something that we've seen the Wolves have trouble with all year. I think that's going to be a problem moving forward in the series, and I expect it to be a big reason for why they end up losing.
Yeah, this one felt like the one they needed to get, in my opinion.
Especially with that game from Ant.
And I think we need to talk about the guy that, to me, is the reason they didn't get this game, and it's Karl Towns. Karl Towns really, really was, I thought, quite poor in this game. He went 3 of 12 from the field, 12 rebounds, 5 turnovers, only had 10 points. You look at the double-double, you can say, okay, whatever, low usage game, et cetera, missed a ton of open threes, including a critical one late in the game that really kind of ended any chance of a real comeback for Minnesota. Defensively, he was awful, I thought, in this game. Like, just really genuinely bad. I thought Jokic really cooked him a lot of times when Gobert was off the court, as opposed to, like, it felt like Gobert at least made life harder for Jokic. Whereas with Towns, it was just like he has to grab him and he has to, like, just try and do what he can, and he ended up with 5 fouls, and it felt like he had no answers defensively. And we're talking about the 2-man game between Gordon and Jokic. I mean, on the final lob play that he hit to Gordon, it wasn't really Towns' fault. They were clearly having Towns shade over to try and provide the rim protection for if Jokic tried to bully his way through Gobert to the basket. And it was clear Ant was just like dog tired. He was like literally grabbing the ends of his shorts and missed the tag entirely. Just missed like a little, he's supposed to like press down and make it so that Aaron Gordon does not have that easy lane for a wide open lob. And he just missed it. He was tired. He was the whole reason they got back into this game. You do see those off ball mishaps with Ant more often than you'd like to see. This one happened in a fairly big spot, but you can't fault Anthony Edwards for this. I think more than anything, you have to fault the structure of this roster in a lot of ways. And it just feels like to me, again, this team has not figured out how to really manage the defensive end of the court in critical moments with both Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. It would be much easier if they had Jaden McDaniels. It'd be so much easier for them. They could throw Jaden McDaniels on Jamal Murray to try and shut him down, lock him up a little bit, make it a little bit harder in terms of getting him off. But I mean, it just feels like that synergy is not there around the basket between Gobert and Towns in a real tangible way to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I honestly think that the Wolves win this game if they have J-Mac. Part of the issue is just they had it wasn't even easy buckets that were killing them. It was the backbreaking Jamal 3, like 4 or 5 foot back steps. And they just had nobody who could contest him. Like they were really struggling to get over screens on him. Even if they did, he was excellent getting into his bag. Like I think that was a real struggle for him. I mean, for the Wolves was having anybody who could stop him. Like I thought, they tried with multiple guys and there wasn't really an answer. And also too, like the offense just wasn't good enough much of early on in the game for them to be able to afford some of the stuff that happened late. Like I know what the final score ended up being, but I still didn't feel very good about their offense in general. Like they missed a ton of easy looks around the rim. It just felt like I said this on the ding. I mean, they just felt like stiff. Like they felt very much not comfortable in anything they were trying to do offensively other than what Ant was going. And I thought Conley honestly had a pretty good game tonight. But even like Rudy's final stat line was nice, but like his hands around the rim were awful today. Like he missed 3 or 4 things just on the roll. I was like, dude, you cannot miss those. Like that, great analysis for me, but that's how it felt in the moment, especially when it's
on some level you have to execute. Like it really comes down to it. In game 1, the Gobert Karl Towns combination, according to playbyplaystats.com, had a 130.8 defensive rating when those two were on the court together. I can't imagine that it's going to be much better this game. I would imagine that it was quite poor again. It just feels like to me they haven't found that answer yet. They have not found that synergy in terms of everything. I will say this. So obviously Denver gets out to a 20-point lead in the first half. I think they're up 13 or so entering halftime. Minnesota goes on this big run. They take the lead in the third quarter. And it's worth breaking down how they did that. I thought that the offensive adjustments they made to put Denver in very difficult positions defensively were awesome. Like they started to short roll Rudy a little bit more often instead of rolling him all the way to the basket, using him as a release valve for when Denver puts 2 on the ball in pick and roll situations. And I thought Rudy in the first half was not quite as good in those short roll settings when he was asked to do it. But in the second half, I thought was a little bit more decisive with the ball. I thought they moved Towns around the perimeter a little bit more, just in terms of using him in creative actions where he was a screener and like slipping screens down to the corner and trying to find little ways to be able to get him open. I thought that really just helped open up the floor entirely for Anthony Edwards, particularly. And that is where you saw Anthony Edwards really excel in this game. He was aggressive. He was confident. His downhill driving game. This is what people have wanted from Anthony Edwards for years now. Just the lack of settling. Stop settling in the mid-range. Stop settling from behind the 3-point line. And he took 10 threes in this game. That's okay, because for me, he got it going in the third quarter by getting downhill, attacking Nikola Jokic, attacking the team's interior defense. And then he started to feel it. And then he was making turnaround fadeaways from the mid-range. He was making sidestep fadeaways from the mid-range to the left. Like, those are the kind of things that I want to see Anthony Edwards do. This was a perfect Anthony Edwards game across the board. I thought he was, you can nitpick some of the defensive stuff off the ball, but I thought he was absolutely perfect in this game. He did everything that you could have asked of him, and he looks like a real franchise player for them. The problem is just that it's hard for them to make it work on defense with this Towns Gobert pairing against a team that can spread them out like Denver can.
Yeah, especially too. And I do want to iterate in the first half. I thought Denver did such a good job of pushing the pace on misses, because I think that's what's so hard for this Minnesota team. As much as when their defense is set, like, they have been mostly solid, but as soon as there's a miss, and especially like they are so rough with missing right around the basket, and then it ends up going the other way, and they got killed on some of those Jokic kick-aheads, and they just didn't really have much of an answer for that. Like, being able to get back in the game like they did was huge. But yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, simple analysis, but it was kind of wild because, watching, I think beginning of the fourth quarter, like probably 10 or 15 seconds before MPJ hits his first basket, I'm like, is he even played tonight? And then he just goes off. Started realizing, hey, I have somebody smaller on me. Like, I can actually just shoot over them. And believe it or not, that works. Like, when you get him and Murray going like they did off of Jokic, and then you have like the roll gravity and presence from AG to just keep moving around and be what he does. And then just kind of cycling around the fifth guy, mostly settling on KCP tonight, who was really good as well. That's just a hard formula to beat. And then you get like Jokic just kind of has like that. He had like a nice like 3 or 4 minute takeover moment where he's like, okay, I'm making this happen. That, I think, to me, that's my biggest takeaway, because I feel like we just didn't consistently see that enough from the Nuggets over the last month of the season. So seeing them kind of find that again, noting who they're playing was key.
Michael Porter Jr. had Denver's first 8 points in the fourth quarter, had, I believe, 11 in the first 6 minutes. And then, you mentioned a couple times the Aaron Gordon kind of, role game with him that I thought was really, really impressive as well. He caught those 2 lobs, if I remember correctly, in the fourth quarter that were just really, really impressive and really, really important moments for the Denver Nuggets in this game. Going into the fourth quarter, I believe that duo only had like 8 points, and they closed the game with 28 points. Because one thing that I was thinking in the third quarter was that the front court for Denver hadn't really gotten loose yet beyond Jokic. It was hard for them. They weren't really presenting a real bailout option, but those guys got loose. And that was, I think, the biggest key for Denver in the fourth quarter, even beyond the incredible exploits of Jamal Murray. And he was absolutely amazing. And Nikola Jokic was absolutely amazing. I think we know what we're going to get from those two kind of at this point, even though Jamal, I think throughout the second half of the year, Jamal has really gotten back to who he is. It's that kind of inconsistent offensive impact that you see from Porter and Gordon from game to game sometimes. Getting those two firing in the fourth quarter to where I think they had right around 20 points in the fourth. To me, that was what swung the game in Denver's favor. Do you see a way back from this for Minnesota, barring Jaden McDaniels, getting some sort of, like Darth Vader hand surgery that then allows him to play in this series?
No, not really. I think, kind of like we mentioned, I think tonight was the night if they were going to get back in. I just don't kind of like we've talked about. I think they don't really have anything that I feel like they can go to that's going to really give Denver problems. And they also don't really consistently have answers to what Denver's going to throw at them. So I'm pretty out on Minnesota getting back in the series. I'd imagine that at best this goes 5.
I would have also said this is a 5-game series. At this point, I think they steal 1 at home. But I think that 5 is the most likely result for me right now as well.